All right, welcome to another edition of the CUSO Lab podcast. I'm Randy Salser, and I'm your host today. Today, I'm excited to welcome one of NACUSO's newest members, Shree, from the founder of Starlight. Shree, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Randy. Excited to be here.
All right, so let me give a brief intro, Starlight. I know you guys are helping credit unions strengthen member financial wellness in a unique way by connecting members with local, state, and federal assistance programs they may already qualify for, but they don't know exist. Luckily, through AI powered programs, or excuse me, through AI powered technology and strong commitment to financial inclusion, Starlight is helping credit unions deepen member relationships while improving financial resilience in the communities they serve. So after we got through that, now let's kick off. So Shree, welcome and thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So I grew up in India and then came to the US for college, and I've spent, a good couple of decades in different parts of the country learning and working in a lot of spaces with a consistent theme around understanding data, insights, and using that to empower sort of proactive ways to help people. I spent about a decade at Google where I was building ads products and measuring the effectiveness of advertising. We call it like the Mad Men problem. Half the ads don't work. You don't know which half. I was building technology solutions to solve it. I left when I got my green card and was quite obsessed with this question of how do you build solutions for the average American, the resident who is kind of in the bottom 60 to 70% of America who's living paycheck to paycheck, and how do you help them with economic outcomes? So I had this like problem space I was curious about, but I was unsure where to go build and work on. And I came to a fellowship program in New York City, which is funded by a foundation here that encourages technologists to go work on problems that matter to society. And I came to this fellowship and kind of got to like explore different ideas and found this massive opportunity in helping people find money and find partners who care about finding money for their members and supporting them. And so Starlight kind of emerged from this sort of like personal goal of like finding a way to align my technology skills with society's needs and then finding a business that matters between them.
I love that. So every founder has a moment that when they realize a problem is too important to ignore. What was that moment for you?
It's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. I think there's like two or three things happening in the world at the same time, and especially in the US, which kind of anchored me into like, oh, this is what I have to do, which was like, one was just like looking at a bunch of data over the last 2 decades about the shrinking middle class and how it was getting accelerated with, at this time, I'm talking like 4 to 5 years ago, you're reading about this and people are talking about the job loss. They're talking about gig work. They're talking about changes in the economy. And we haven't even talked about the word AI yet. It's like we're talking about traditional automation and jobs and 1099 work becoming more common than W2. It's like 35% of the US economy is gig work primarily. And so that's like one big trend. The second was COVID forced a bunch of governments to learn how to operate without pen and paper and without in-office work. And so you saw this rapid digitization of like hundreds of wings of government at federal, state, local. And I was at Google then, and we actually did like a 20% part-time project. We were helping a bunch of cities and nonprofits like learn and adapt to this new world. And so I saw this firsthand where we were like, the speed of digital transformation in various industries can be slow. And suddenly COVID accelerated it at a pace that's unheard of, and even in government, which is shocking.
Right.
And then the third aspect, which is very interesting, was the rise of like technology solutions that can be embedded inside other people's products. So if you think about like Zelle inside your banking app, or you think about your credit union showing you your credit score through a third-party company powering, like a Savvy Money or an Experian or a TransUnion. And so the emergence of this embedded technology was just kind of starting to happen. And so it led to this sort of underlying big thing where I was like, oh, if I can proactively find money for people through something they trust, which is like an institution like a local credit union, who's like in the community, has trust, it suddenly became like, oh, this is an idea. Then we went and started testing it with some local credit unions in New York, a local fintech that helps gig workers. In both cases, like the response was so strong. I was like, oh, to your point, it went from a project to like, oh, this is the thing.
It's real.
Like it must exist, right? It suddenly just went from, I wonder if people wanted to like, okay, now I got to go take this and try to make it happen. And so I think that shift happened about, so maybe like 6 months before we like seriously started like sort of getting true stage as an investor and became more serious, was we like, kind of realized in like April about 3 years ago that this is not real, right? Like let's try and give this a shot.
I love that. I came from this space from outside and I didn't know much about credit unions and fell in love with them. But why credit unions and what have you learned about the credit union movement that has surprised you since entering it?
Yeah. I mean, like, I knew credit unions as a consumer. When I moved to America, my first bank was a credit union because they were like in university, in the University of Texas, and UFCU was my first credit union. And like to this day, like, I mean, they were the first ones to give me a credit card, first ones to give me a line. And it's like a very strong affiliation for me. And then I continue on, and then years later, I'm building this business. A friend of mine just says, "Hey, Shree, have you thought about selling to credit unions with what you do? You're already working with some nonprofits locally, doing some testing. I actually have a buddy of mine whose company like sells to credit unions. You want to talk to him?" I talked to a sales guy at his company, and he just goes, "Shree, I love this. Like, we're gonna go find you a credit union customer. Like, now this makes so much sense." And like it's one of those where I was like, I wasn't sure, but he was so sure. And then we started talking and going to my first like GAC, my first sort of credit union conference, and started to meet the executives, meet the like frontline teams, and just saw the sort of almost like we were accidentally doing what everyone talks about the mission of the credit unions, which is
Yeah.
people helping people. So it's almost like I almost think of our company now as like people helping people with tech. It's like a little like, asterisk what we do, right? And so that was very surprising to me. It was just like how strongly aligned people were with not just profit-seeking behavior, because it's like genuinely cooperative movement like at its finest. And like I grew up in India where cooperative movements are so very strong, and there's a lot of strong banking credit union history, and we used to bank with one when we were growing up as well with my family. And so I remember this sort of importance of this and how it has a different incentive structure, how people are motivated, and how organizations operate, and how in banking deserts you see credit unions show up. And then so then that kind of the interesting piece on top of that is also the fact that credit unions are less competitive by nature, which is very cool and interesting. And NACUSO is obviously a great example of it. But even in the small things, a credit union exec might be like, "I know this other credit union leader you should talk to. Would you like to speak to them?" And I'm like, "That's so nice." And like, I appreciate that the willingness to kind of grow and share with others is extremely strong.
I am amazed every day by it. I love, I've known it for over a decade now, just watching credit unions collaborate and talk to each other and share ideas, share what worked, and importantly, what doesn't work. But just the willingness to sit down and take someone's call or go to coffee, grab lunch, it's incredible. And I know of no other space like that. It's truly like organic to credit unions.
It's very unique. And also, I think there's both a humility and also a realization that like in a financial services industry dominated by behemoths, like almost like a collective success is the only way you sustain yourself, right, as an industry. So there's a necessity, but also a nice part of it. And I think that comes really naturally with like the kind of people it attracts and the talent that ends up coming to credit unions.
You're right. It's truly the competitive advantage for credit unions. So for those that are hearing about Starlight for the first time, what exactly does Starlight do, or your platform?
Yeah, exactly. That's a great question. So Starlight helps proactively find members financial assistance. And what I mean by that is proactive is the idea that when someone walks in and asks for help, your staff might not actually know the answer if it's not one of our financial products. We might know how to give someone a checking account, a credit builder card, high yield savings account. We might have LPL for like wealth management, but we're like, what if someone's like, "Hey, I'm like kind of struggling to make my utility bill. What can you do?" And there's a question that actually is already happening at like 5 to 10% of the call centers. Like call volume is driven by financial stress. Collections team deal with this every day. And what happens is now you can actually give members something that immediately helps them find assistance. What Starlight does is we understand a little bit of context about the member, where they live, what is their household structure, what is their household income. And then we can actually start to guide them through every benefit that they can qualify for locally, which could be like SNAP for food, or it could be utility assistance for the utility bill. In the summer, it's like AC costs, right? Or in the winter, it's heating costs. There's also programs for childcare assistance. There are programs for down payment. There's programs for retrofitting your home for if you're in a cold country, or in a warm country, you might have support, a warm state, you might have more support for air conditioning in the summer. We also have programs that are like disaster relief, like, in hurricane and tornado zones. We see that at that moment, people might need help navigating this really complicated system of applying for assistance in a time when you're very stressed. So we cover a variety of key expenses, understand the federal, state, and local programs across all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and DC. And then your member is able to get this amazing personalized guided support almost like your best frontline staff member, but is delivered digitally. And all the support is handled by my team as well, so that it's not like burdening your staff. And then at the end of this, what you're actually doing is building financial resilience, because there's about $100 billion a year that goes unused in programs that people are qualified for. And this is the households that need it the most. These are our like paycheck to paycheck living, hardworking, like sort of brass tacks Americans who are struggling. And we need to like help them as well. And it's part of like what our credit unions have already been set up to do for so many years. And so this is almost like building on that movement. And then the member engages with Starlight, gets assistance, and then we can bring them back and say, hey, now that you've got some savings, can we help you put in a high yield savings? And so we're white labeled, enabling the credit union to be at the center of a longer, deeper relationship with the member, especially when previously you might have been like, well, I can't really do anything for them until they're ready for a car loan. And the answer is no, you are. You can. And you can actually build that relationship.
That's interesting. You mentioned $100 billion goes unused. Why is it so difficult for consumers to access or even find those programs that they're already eligible for?
Yeah, I mean, it's like no fault of anyone. It's almost like the tragedy of the commons, where you have a variety of agencies with eligibility criteria and processes that are disparate and broken and sometimes fragmented at the county level. Like 3 different counties might have a different process for utility assistance. And the income thresholds are different and your household looks different. And so quite often, the first thing is people like might not know about a program, especially they might have heard about, let's say, SNAP, but they might not have heard about WIC, which is for young parents. And they get assistance on food because raising a kid is quite expensive. And so it's an example where people might not have heard about it, or they've heard about it, but they have this notion that they think it's not for me, is the phrase we hear sometimes when we do our community conversations. And so the question becomes, how do you make it disarming and easy? And so at scale, what we think a lot of the reason is that there's awareness challenges, there's complexity challenges, there's also shame and fear. And then there's like practical like workflow challenges where they're like, how do I get from step 1 to submitted, received, accepted, and delivered? And it's like you got to collect some documents. Maybe it's proof of bank statements, proof of income, proof of work. And sometimes that seems unbounded and weird. If you make it finite and make it time bound and say, look, this will take you about 12 minutes. These are the 4 things you need. And they're like, oh, you gave me a checklist. You made my life easier. Like TurboTax is so much better than downloading the IRS 1040 form and submitting your own.
Right.
No one goes back to doing it themselves.
That's
right. That's kind of where we think we're going to make it so simple. It feels like a really smooth and rapid experience.
Yeah. I love what you mentioned about sometimes it's easier to do this via a computer because they have that, oh, I don't want people to know I'm struggling right now or I'm having a hard time. So this is such a great use of technology to try to help your member.
No, big time. And actually, a couple of my credit unions, they've mentioned to me that when they market it to their membership, they talk about the privacy as a really important aspect. Because people are like, especially if you live in a small town, you don't want everyone to know your business. And so here's a way to do it. Find a help. Do it sort of confidently knowing that it's not going to be like something that you're worried about.
Yeah. What a great service.
And then and I was going to say, the other thing I'd add is the stigma is also a big piece, right? If it's like, hey, you know what? You've been paying taxes for 15 years. You hit a rough patch. You lost your job. You need help right now. You'll be back on your feet in 2 years. Like, it doesn't matter. So the question really is that in that moment, that bridge is the difference between resilience and sort of a downward spiral. And so, but that needs a mind shift. And sometimes we actually spent a lot of time with like language testing about like, what is sort of language that feels more approachable? So the members feel supported and they receive the assistance they deserve and don't feel stressed about it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So how are you, we hear AI everywhere. We just come off our annual conference where it's just everybody's talking, everybody's mentioning it, but how are you guys using AI in a way that creates real value rather than just simply adding another technology buzzword that says, hey, we use AI?
Yeah. I mean, great question. And I would say like this business would not be possible without AI for us. And so the challenge for us has always been, how do you reasonably build and scale like finding and tracking every program? Like keeping up with eligibility and application process for like 800 plus benefits is difficult without AI, right? I would have to have a much larger team. Second piece is that it's quite hard to also identify and predict what each household needs. Because like if you take 5 different households with different income structures, ages of people in their families, the answer for each one's quite different. So we are using AI to actually be able to be more predictive of which household needs which benefits. We partner with the credit unions to say, hey, what should our targeting be? What should our surfacing be? and how can we help them? And then the other side of it is we're going to use AI, and we've not built this piece yet. We've tested this a little bit. Is we want to use AI in support of the household and being their agent. So if you already got KYC, expense and income at your credit union, can we pull that with your permission and fill it in on a form? There's like 900 to 1,000 forms you got to fill for different markets, different regions, different programs, and they keep growing. So we are trying to build like the auto apply button. Click a button, we fill in everything, you review it and say, looks good. And like, it's like there's no reason why we can't do that with technology. And so it's almost like our bets with AI are very much around scraping and tracking things, surfacing things correctly, and then executing on behalf of the user. And so there are different aspects of how this AI sort of flows through. And then there's a more practical example where like we want to support all the languages. AI makes that super easy. Like previously it would have been heavy lift. We're already in English and Spanish and nationwide. Like this speed could not have been accomplished without a lot of really interesting innovations that we're kind of building on top of.
I love that. So one of the key areas for credit unions and ones that are always looking for ways to improve is financial wellness. Where do you think we've made the most progress, and where may there be some room for improvement still?
It's a great question. And I would say just like I've spent a lot of time with like policy folks, people at like research think tanks and academics, because there's a lot of work that's already done. So the question is like, can you commercialize academic literature and put it in front of 1 million members? And that's kind of the way I think about it. I'm like, I'm not here trying to like be the PhD who came up with the process. I'm more like, you're the PhD, but I will get your idea and thesis, which is proven, in front of millions of households.
Right.
And so in the case of financial literacy and education, like we know pretty well that pure literacy doesn't shift economic outcomes because people are in financial stress. Yeah. And the only way you help someone who's struggling financially is grow their income or lower their expenses.
Yeah.
Everything else, like you come to someone and be like, let me teach you how to budget. And you're like, no. I know my budget is broken because I make less than I spend for supporting my family. And like, you don't need like a complicated conversation for an hour to do that. So one of our big theories of how we think about the business is that you got to help immediately fix the problem at the root cause, which is like try to lower expenses, stabilize incomes, help apply for immediate catch up and sustenance programs, right? Like there's a program, for example, in New York City with one of our credit unions where we help people catch up on the utility bills. 80% of the members we reached out to were behind on utilities that winter. And we're like, okay, we're not going to go talk to them about budgeting. We're just like, let me get you caught up. The local utility had a program. We helped them apply. We helped them get it. $13,000 within like a couple of weeks in a pilot. And we're like, this is great.
It's incredible.
And then they were like, now let's go talk about the next thing, which the credit union is actually very good at, which is like, they can be like, hey, we've got some products to help you improve your savings, credit builders. Like you almost like fix the immediate problem, plug the leak, and then like grow from there. And, I think that's like a big piece of how we've been thinking about it. And then the other side of it is credit unions have really strong intent, but they're also overwhelmed with the amount of products and services that they're touching. So one of the things that we find in the financial wellness space is people are stretched. So you might have team members who are like out doing a reality fair at a high school. They're then also trying to do a coaching session. They're also trying to design and communicate like video lessons to like thousands of members. And they're doing like a seminar about your first home buying purchase process. And so the services that our credit unions are doing are great, but like a lot of them are like scale linearly with talent and available capacity. And so you have to think about accelerants to really reach everybody. And that's where like the proactivity and the digital is like a big reason that we exist, is we're like, no, we're amplifying your work. Because you cannot individually sustain serving all of your members. Like one of my credit unions had a single person trying to do what Starlight does for 40,000 members.
Yeah.
And then they saw our solution. They're like, oh, now we can actually serve all 40,000 with that same sort of rigor and quality. But like as a backstop, we have our team, but like the front line becomes Starlight.
Yeah. And it's white labeled, so it looks like it's the credit union. So it's just
100%. 100%. And then I was going to say, the other thing I would add, when you think about this financial wellness thing, is it's good for business. Like Filene's did this amazing piece of research about 2-3 years ago where they said folks who get help when they're struggling, and that's 80% of members have come to the credit union asking for help, only 23% felt that the credit union was showing up and helping them at that moment. You close that gap, it leads to a 3x higher loyalty. It leads to better cross-sell and more opportunities to grow as well, super easily.
That's incredible. Well, you talked about seeing all these data and being able to be in front of so many members. What are some of the trends you're seeing among younger members and financially stressed households that credit unions need to pay attention to?
I think the big trend that we see quite often on this one is that when you think about Gen Z, Gen Alpha, you also think about the working Alice workers, which is asset limited, income constrained, but employed. That is 60% of the American workforce. And so if you're trying to attract young members, keep them in, your set of products and services you offer has to be different from what you historically done when the middle class was booming and people had tons of disposable income. So in this new world, like credit unions have to adapt to this world. You've seen the rise of Cash App, you've seen the rise of Chime, you've seen the emergence of all these earned wage access companies that are coming in and giving a small, like, paycheck 2 weeks early, and they have like combined over 21 million members
Yeah.
using these services. And so credit unions are actually set up for this, have low cost loans, but they're not in the right rooms, in the right conversations to be presented as an option. And so the opportunity is almost massive. And we're almost like, we already have like the product set and the mindset. We just don't have the delivery and the mechanism and the communication of what we can do for them.
I had this conversation earlier today we were talking about my son, and if he's 20, if you asked him what his primary financial institution was, he would tell you it was Cash App. Right.
This is it, right? Exactly.
Perfect example. So if you're speaking to a room, say, full of credit union CEOs, what's one thing you'd encourage them to start thinking differently about?
So, I mean, the biggest thing I would say for a room full of credit union CEOs, which is really important, is like financial wellness isn't a fringe problem. Like you actually have to realize that serving your members with the right next best product is the most important thing you do. And Starlight is the right next best product for 60% of the Americans because you need help. You need to support them and give them the support they need. And the other thing is, this is a relationship game. The member you helped yesterday is the one who's getting a car loan tomorrow. And you look at like Robinhood, who went from average brokerage accounts of $700 to $7,000 in 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't need a better example of growing with your members and how it works. SoFi started with purely just serving college refinancing. And now they have like one of the largest empires of like different types of lending products, and they're competing at scale and mass straight into a tier that they skip past by just growing with their members as they got wealthier, right? You've seen this with Chime and its evolution. You're seeing it with Cash App. And so the credit unions are actually predisposed to being successful in this because they have low to moderate income members, support them when they're down, they have the best rates, and they're not growing with them because they're leading into a transactional relationship. The credit unions I find most thoughtfully thinking about long-term member relationships are the ones that are really going to win in this game as you think about the next sort of like 20 years of the credit union movement. And that to me is like includes thinking about how do I serve my members' entire needs, not which of my current products serve them. Because the answer lies not just in your current products, but in your future product set and how it serves the members correctly.
That's a great answer. So as we wind down, I just have a couple more questions, but where do you see Starlight in the next 3 to 5 years?
Great question. I'd say, I'll tell you one thing, which is more about like where are we heading is different from where we are today, which is that, today we're embedded in credit unions, serving their members, finding them money, guiding them. But we haven't done much on the last part, which I kind of hinted at with the utility example is like, I want to build the magic button to help you submit. If I do that really well, we solve the systems problem, which is that the government is struggling because there's a lot of applicants and not enough people to process applications. Quality is bad, so people send in wrong documents, get sent back. Same thing that loan officers deal with, right? It's like almost a similar problem. And we're like, if we can bring technology and automation, we can solve access and opportunity for members, financial strength and resilience so that they become better, higher deposits, better repayment rates for the credit union. And then we go to the civic institutions and utilities and you're like, guys, you want this program to work and get to the hands of the right people? Guess who knows all of them? Your credit union does. Because they know the member, they know his financial history, they know his expenses, they know his identity. And they can be like, I want to make sure the money goes to the right people. And so Starlight in 5 years should be embedded in every credit union. It should be almost like treated like Zelle, where like every credit union has to have it. Because the member's like, what, you don't have that? I need that. It's one of the things I need. And then on the other side, we want like, anytime you go into like a government form or application, you're like, oh, can I submit with Starlight? And the answer is yeah, you probably can, right? And then it goes, pulls your data with your permission from your credit union, makes your life easier, right? Where an enablement layer to like not allow there to be a complexity tax on the lower to moderate middle class of America. And as the economy kind of gets into this K-shaped economy that you hear a lot in the media lately, it's you need to focus on the sides of the K that are not thriving and help them thrive. And so it's almost like you're building the support system to like bring the whole country up together and support that infrastructure, because then you actually see efficiency kind of play out and people's financial resilience goes up. And then they're like actually like kind of like boosting themselves out of challenges they have. It's not like a handout, it's actually a handout where like you're growing and building your own resilience.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned there. It's almost like we always often, or not always, but often talk about legacy tech stacks within credit unions and financial institutions, but the government financial institution, probably their tech stack doesn't keep up either. So if you could help on both sides of that, that is something that's I'm sure open up the floodgates.
Yeah. It's funny when I'm hiring, I always talk about it. I'm like, guys, we build plumbing between two arcane industries.
That's right. That's a great analogy. So I'll give you one last question. If our listeners remember just one thing about Starlight after this conversation, what would you want it to be?
I think the one thing they need to remember is financial security for every household is good business and also good for your mission. Like, remember, both things matter, because I'd say, the biggest thing that we've seen is the varieties of households we serve at a credit union are far greater than they would have expected when they signed with us.
Yeah.
And so the thing you have to realize is every member needs this. They just haven't told you yet.
Right.
And so the question is that in that life journey, you are present for the members in everything they need. And sometimes the answer is to partner to deliver your mission.
I love that. Well, Sri, thanks for joining us today. It was a lot of fun. I look forward to more dialogue on this. And for our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to tune in for our next episode coming soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks so much, Randy.